Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well. Welcome back to tonight's second half. Wow, what a sweltering day it was in upstate New York. I hope that if it was sweltering where you guys are, that all of you stayed cool. I myself did not. I did a bunch of yard work for my dad that I have been putting off, and just really actually had a great time sweating and just, you know, having a blast. But guys, please, I don't want anyone getting overheated and getting dehydrated and having to go to the hospital. So stay cool. It was about 92 degrees with a high humidity in upstate today, so I imagine elsewhere it was hotter. But anyway, before we get into today's second half, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. The merch is displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They all were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads, click that bell icon. And folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things, they really do help this channel to continue to grow and go, and they definitely matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into tonight's second half, shall we? Hey, Jeff. I hope you're feeling better. I also suffer from neuropathy due to extensive chemotherapy I had a few years back. Although I am in remission now, the damage was done. Anyway, enough about that. I have a story to tell you about an encounter that I heard my dad speak of many years ago. I was born in Chicago, but I was raised in South Texas in a small town in the Rio Grande Valley. I remember my dad telling this story, but I was not supposed to have heard it. The encounter happened in the mid-70s when my dad had gotten a job working for a local sugarcane, as it was known back then. There still is sugarcane planted down there, and the mill is still operational to this day. Anyway, when it was time to harvest the sugarcane, it would be a 24-hour operation. They had these huge combine-looking machines that were used. Once they became full, they would dump the cane into trucks, which my dad used to drive. So one night, my dad didn't go to work, and this is when I overheard him telling the story. Over the past few nights, a lot of the combine drivers were either refusing to work or quitting. Apparently, one night, as one of the combine drivers was working, all of a sudden, what he thought was a giant wolf came out from behind the rows of the sugarcane and sneered at him. It then ran back into the rows of the sugarcane. The man thought it was kind of strange, since there is not any wolves found this far south in Texas. Coyotes, yes, wolves, no. As the man continued to drive his machine, what he saw next made him stop the machine in his tracks. The wolf was there again, but this time it was standing on both of its back legs. The man thought it was probably growling at him, but since the machine was on, he really couldn't hear it. But it was definitely chapped at him, and was showing his teeth towards him. The man described the beast to be standing at least 7 or 8 feet tall, with what he called the lower body of a man and the head of a dog. The man thought he was seeing the devil himself, and when he explained what he saw, his other coworkers just laughed at him, saying he shouldn't be drinking while driving the huge machines. Needless to say, the man quit that night and said he knew what he saw and hoped no one else would see it. Apparently, over the next few nights, Other drivers started seeing the same thing. And one of the drivers said it was not the devil, but a werewolf that everyone was seeing. This went on for about 2 weeks, and just like the sighting started, they all of a sudden stopped. Fast forward to 2016. And this night I was visiting my brother at his trailer house. We were both sitting outside on the tailgate of his truck. I was on my third beer when I noticed everything went silent. So you can get a better idea, my brother lived in the outskirts of the local town. It was his house, then his neighbor's, and then about a half a mile down the road, another neighbor. In between the houses was farmland. At this particular time, the crop that was growing was corn. It was already at the point of being harvested, so the corn stalks were standing pretty high. Anyway, as I said, I noticed everything went dead silent, except for the light wind that was blowing, causing the corn stalks to move. When I got the feeling we were being watched, my brother noticed me turning around and looking toward the cornfields, and asked, was I seeing something? I told him no, then asked him did he see something, and he said no. We both stood there for what seemed like an eternity in the silence. When I finally told him I couldn't drink out here because it was too quiet for me, we just ended up going back inside. That night I couldn't sleep at all and kept hearing this dog bark all night. Then, time to time, I would hear something walking outside. I'm not saying it was a Dogman, but I know we were being watched, and that feeling of dread I had the whole night. Well, this is my experience. I know it isn't much, but just thought I needed to tell someone about this, Jeff. By the way, Jeff, I'm back living on the north side of Chi-Town in Humboldt Park. Continue the good work, and you can call me a local nightmare. Today's second Texas subscriber submission. Hey Jeff, the following happened when I was about 12 years old. I'll describe the layout of the area we lived in back then. My street, located on the north side of downtown, was a mile long and had a dead end. Behind the houses on one side were more houses, but behind the houses on my side of the street was a patch of woods that stretched the length of our street and further beyond the dead end, to the bayou that ran behind our neighborhood. Now, we had built clubhouses and played in those woods all the time. It was a sunny Sunday in Houston, Texas, 1988. I was riding home from church in the back seat of my mom's car. We turned onto my street, and as we passed one of the lots without a house built there, I saw my friends hanging out near the woodline. I got home, changed out of my church clothes, and grabbed my bike and rode back down to where I saw them. When I got within sight of them, I observed as they were entering the woodline. I pedaled up to where several of them left their bikes, got off my bike, and ran full speed in order to catch up with them. I was no further than 10 feet into the woodline when I heard the loudest, most guttural growl I'd ever heard. It stopped me dead in my tracks. The sound made all the organs in my chest cavity vibrate. And I will admit that feeling scared me more than the sound did. Without moving my head, I darted my eyes from left to right, and then back again, scanning the woods, but I didn't see anything. I probably stood there for 10 seconds processing what I heard, before I turned tail, jumped back on my bike, and I was out of there. I never stepped foot in those woods again, and we moved shortly thereafter. Thinking back, the sound this thing made, its lung capacity, it must have been gargantuan. I don't understand how something capable of making a sound like that one I heard could roam the fourth largest city in the country undetected. But Houston is known as a bayou city. We have a network of them, just like the one behind my neighborhood, that runs like veins throughout the city. They could theoretically come and go as they please. That's not exactly a comforting thought. I thank my lucky stars all the time that I did not lay my eyes on it. Today's third subscriber submission from Texas. Hey Jeff, I hope this finds you well. I had just turned 16. My birthday is the first week of November, which is the deer season opener in Texas. I wanted to spend the weekend with my best friend, let's call her Vicky. Her aunt and uncle had come in from Ohio. The adults had plans, with the ladies heading off to a bar to listen to a band about an hour away, and the guys were going raccoon hunting. That's what they called driving the back roads and drinking a bit. Vicky's mom had invited me herself to help watch Vicky's brother. We'll call him Mike. Mike loved for me to tell him bedtime stories, and I liked telling them. Vicky's family lived in the woods. The nearest house was about 1.5 miles away. They had put the house in the middle of 200 acres, gorgeous central Texas thicket. When facing the house, the drive went to a carport to the right. Vicky's room was on the opposite of that wall, with a vegetable garden outside of Vicky's window. This is important later. My mom drops me off early that evening, just in time for the adults to head out on their adventures. I remember having tuna melts for dinner that night, because my mom had always told me you can't eat fish with cheese, and I was worried I was going to get sick. Vicky promised me I wasn't. I didn't. I still love them to this day. We watched a little sat TV, and then it was time for Mike's bedtime stories. After a tale of giants and heroes, he was off to dreamland. Vicky and I had been left a wine cooler each and went to her room with them to listen to music and whatever else we did back then. It wasn't late, maybe 10:30. Vicky had just gotten off the phone with her boyfriend. They got into an argument because she wouldn't let him come over that night, sipping on our wine coolers and complaining about boys when the lights went out. This wasn't uncommon out there and would usually come back on in a few seconds. Instead, her room filled with this bluish white light. I mean, it was brighter than the day. We had looked at each other, and Vicky said, "I bet it's Daddy and Uncle Phil trying to scare us, shining the spotlights in the window." Then it was morning, just like that. I awoke very confused, and I was wearing Vicky's PJs. She was still asleep, wearing mine. For a few minutes, I couldn't for the life of me figure this out. I woke Vicky up. She sat up and was groggy. After a time or two, she had asked why I was wearing her PJs, and I had no answer. After using the bathroom, we tried to put together what happened. We both remembered the events leading up to the lights, and nothing. It was still pretty early. The sun was barely up. Mike was still asleep, and we had questions. None of the adults were back yet. The ladies had stopped and got a late-night breakfast after the club and decided to take a little nap. A little drunk, I guess. The guys were still out. We got dressed and went outside to look for tracks that had to have been there from her dad's truck. There was none. It had been raining earlier that week, and there would have been tracks in the soft earth. Not to mention, it would have rutted up the garden to get that close to be that bright. At that point, I think we both knew there was no light in a truck that could make that light. Plus, we had been in our jeans and t-shirts the last we remembered. Going back inside, Mike was up and ready for breakfast. I went back into the bedroom and found our wine cooler still half full. I called my mom and went home early. She wouldn't talk about it to this day. I forgot about it myself until about 15 years ago when I saw a nightlight that was kind of the same color as the light that filled that room that night. I still have no clear recollection of what happened. I ran into Mike several years back. They all moved to Ohio in the early 90s. He still remembers the giant stories. I asked him if he remembered anything odd going on when he lived out there. He said that odd things followed all of his family, no matter where they lived. Today's fourth Texas subscriber submission. Hey Jeff, good day. My encounter is not at all that spectacular, but your channel has inspired me to share it. I've never told anyone about this, but it is definitely true, so here goes. This happened in the spring of 2017 in DeSoto, Texas, which is in Dallas County. I had traveled to Dallas for a 3-day continuing education conference for work and was returning home to where I live, over 150 miles west of Dallas, almost straight as the crow flies off of I-20. I was exhausted mentally and physically because there was so much negativity going on in my life at the time. My husband was deployed overseas to Afghanistan, so I was worried about him. My son was in and out of the hospital for drug addiction and serious mental health issues due to his drug use. I worried for both of them constantly. I myself was having serious health problems, but had so much to deal with since I was the only one around. I had no time to handle anything extra. As I drove along I-35 thinking of everything that was tearing me apart, and also trying to make myself remember not to forget to pick up my dog at the Borders on the way home, I missed my exit onto I-20 and ended up in DeSoto. At some point, I realized that things didn't look familiar, and that I needed to exit off and turn around. I found a place to exit off, and it took me to the side of the road that was sort of secluded, but still had sparse population of homes alongside. In my confusion, I passed a bridge that I needed to cross to be able to turn around. That's just what I needed, was to be lost and get lost again. Ugh. I looked for a good place to turn around and saw a driveway up ahead. I pulled in, my light shone directly onto 3 metal garbage cans with lids sitting in a rack-type kind of receptacle a little off the ground. My eyes were still trying to adjust to the recent day-to-night lighting conditions, so I wasn't sure that what I saw was what I saw, so I looked again. For sure, I saw a dog standing bipedally. It was solid black, at least 6.5, maybe 7 feet tall. It had human-like arms, shoulders, chest, abs. Its ears were pointed high on its head, and it had a longer, slimmer muzzle. As most people say, it had a German Shepherd look. Its face had a little gray hair on the muzzle all the way around. Its mouth was closed. I couldn't see its lower half because it was behind the trash cans. I think it was shocked to see me as I was it. I backed up, turned around, and got back onto the right route home. I was so stressed with my life at that point that it did not bother me as profoundly as I thought it would. And I soon forgot about it because I had so many more problems than just accidentally seeing a Dogman. I just shrugged it off and kept going, almost feeling like I was losing my mind. In fact, things got worse for a bit after seeing it. Shortly after, I was in a car accident, and a few months later, my son passed away from a drug overdose. I almost feel as if seeing the Dogman was an omen of sorts. Had I been in my right mind at the time of seeing it, I'd have driven away and pulled over to a gas station to pray and ask God for a hedge of protection against the evil I had just witnessed. My apologies if this is boring or frivolous in any way. I just thought you may want to know about it. Take care and be blessed. If this makes it to the episode on your channel, please refer to me as Mrs. Long. Sincerely, Mrs. Long, proud Air Force wife, military spouse, the hardest job in the military. Wow, I'm kind of glad that I'm doing these subscriber submissions because it's refreshing my memory. I had completely forgotten about this encounter until I just read it. I explained to Mrs. Long one of my pet peeves, that no encounter, no matter what they feel like, is any larger, any smaller, any more or less important. We learn something from each and every encounter. I also, through this time of my channel, this is the second mom that actually lost a child. And it's incredibly hard. And one of the moms I really care and respect. I care and respect for everybody, but This channel has really introduced me to some of the most strongest, bravest people I have ever met in my life. So, alright, let's move on. Today's 5th Texas subscriber submission. Hey Jeff, first of all, I am a no BS kind of guy. Red-blooded American, worked my butt off for the state of Texas for 30 years, and now I'm happily retired. I have health issues, and this will play into why I was up so early that morning. Look, I've heard of all kinds of stuff that go bump in the night, but you have to take it with a grain of salt and move on. What I saw that morning in 2019, July of, has changed me for life. For one, I try my best not to go outside anymore. I've put a lot of research into cryptids trying to understand what I saw and identified it. Okay, first a little bit more about me. I receive life-giving treatments at 5 in the morning. I have worked hard to get to where I am. I also love life and never thought that I would see a Bigfoot, Dogman, because I don't take my butt out into the woods. I live in the suburbs of Austin, Texas, in a city called Hutto. It's nice. Now for the encounter. That morning I left home a little before 4 in the morning. I drove a 2014 Mustang GT. Yeah, the type of car matters, you'll see in a bit. As I was driving on a dark farm road about 30 feet in front of me, from the left runs this thing the size of a baby horse. The GT has great LEDs, so what I saw well. It was some form of canine, but larger, long front arms with short muscular rear legs. It had a barreled chest with a kind of skinny stomach, no tail, long snout. It was taller than the hood of my car. As it ran from the tree line into the cornfield, my mind attempted to process what I was seeing, at the same time yelling, "Oh my God, oh my God!" You see, we are not expecting to see stuff that is just folklore, legend. Everything you believe about monsters just comes true, but wait. This hairless thing was pinkish in color. It was void of pigment, an absolute abomination to God and nature. So I recover from seeing this thing and go into research mode. First thought was legendary chupacabra, because of the state. Then I thought it was a manged bear. Oh my God, that was close, but the legs were all wrong. Then a few weeks later, I was listening to Dogman Encounters, where a young lady was scared by a skinny manged dogman light bulb. Did I see a version of a dogman in Hutto, Texas? This is my experience. Today's final Texas subscriber submission. Hey Jeff, where to start? At the beginning, I guess. 1981, my older sister, by 22 years, purchased about an acre of land near a lake in the area where my mom and dad grew up. It was a very rural area, a good 15 miles from the nearest town. That summer, her and her husband decided to go camping, and it'd be fun. So, with a couple of cousins, my little sister, myself, we made the 2.5-hour drive from Houston to Central Texas Thicket. My little sister Paula and I had been excited for this trip. She was 9 or 10 years old. We had a lot of fun that first day. Paula and I had never been camping before. Being city girls, was completely enchanted by the woods and the water. With tents set up and the lovely fire going, we made hot dogs and s'mores that evening. My big sister Peggy told us stories about mom and dad growing up and how they met and so on. No scary stories though. One of my cousins was still pretty little and no one wanted him scared. All in all, it was a perfect day. We went to bed. I woke up a little later with Paula snuggling against me, saying she was cold. Being a dutiful big sister, I suggested we go out by the fire and warm up, which we did. With Paula sitting in the lawn chair, I added a little wood and the embers to get the small fire up. I sat in the chair next to her and took in the night. I had never seen so many stars. Heck, I had no idea there were so many. I will never forget what happened next. My eyes cast upward. Paula was talking about something when she stopped mid-sentence and grabbed my arm. I looked at her, and she was staring at something across from the fire. I followed her gaze, and there, on the other side of the fire, was a man, a little man. He couldn't have been more than 1.5 feet tall. He had a brown beard that went down a little to his chest. He was dressed in a green shirt and brownish pants. I kid you not. A little brown pointed hat. Now, garden gnomes were not a thing at that time, but I had seen illustrations like this in books. This was not a drawing. I slowly stood up and very quietly began to walk around the fire. This had to have been a joke. Maybe my brother-in-law set this out to prank us, to maybe scare us kids to go back into our tents. I got within 10 feet away of him when he turned his head to look at me. He then turned away and ran away so fast that all I could see was dead leaves and sand blowing up from this, like a speeding car just blew past us. In less than a blink of a second, he was gone. I stood there stunned. I walked back to Paula and took her hand, and we went back to the tent. The oddest thing was we were not scared by seeing him, but kind of felt dazed. We both fell asleep almost as soon as we got back into our sleeping bags. It wasn't until we got back to Houston that Paula told me about her little man dream. Nope, not a dream. I was there too. I saw him. Not until I was an adult watching some paranormal program did I find out a lot of people have seen these things all over the world. Not scary, but strange nonetheless. Thank you for your forum and the chance to be heard with no judgment. Alright folks, I hope you all enjoyed tonight's second half as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting this channel. Your support is what makes this channel so special and what makes it to continue to grow and go. Guys, please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on your children, your pets, your loved ones, and your friends. Share the information that we share with each other on a daily basis. And God bless you all.